Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes. We're on the homecoming server called Everlasting. We have our Brute, our Energy Melee Willpower Brute, Liberty Lass, who is now 10th level. We have uh, almost 3,000 XP needed to get to level 11, and we have 57,000 influence, which isn't bad, but heck, you need an awful lot more than that. We do have, as a backup plan, my level 50 character, who is named Silver Phoenix, the first character I ever played when City of Heroes came back onto Homecoming and was available in 2019. And by the end of 2019, I had her to level 50. And I do have a bunch of old playlists for that character if you want to go and watch those. There's a lot more systematic tutorial and explanation in that series than what you're going to get here. So I know a lot of times people don't like watching old videos, and I'm not trying to get people to give me more clicks on those videos, but I really didn't intend to do a lot of tutorializing when I started this, so I'm kind of like doing a catch as catch can. Oh, I didn't talk about this, so let's talk about it. And it's not as organized, so I do apologize for that. We have two toggles running, so we may start running into some endurance issues. If we need to, I will turn the top toggle off, which is the one that gives us more resistance, because the one we don't want to turn off is the Mez Defense. Okay, so we now have 5 hold protection. I think when I was checking it, it was 25. It must have been when I leveled up, and I didn't think about that. That's normal. You will see it go up as we level, right? It also might go up if we get certain buffs, and we get certain accolades and stuff like that, but mostly what happens is it starts around 5 or 6, and then it increases by a few tenths of a point every time you level. So now, the toggle won't be super useful against these guys, and I might turn it off if we have any endurance issues pretty early. And the reason is that they mostly do energy attacks, the way I do, right? They're sort of like our character here, in that they primarily do they do like they're 2/3 ish energy their damage and about 1/3 smashing with their punches, and I do my energy melee attacks do about 2/3 energy, right? You see that 19 was energy and the 6 was smashing, sort of physical damage. So we need to defeat I-Beam and its minions, and we have to rescue 5 scientists. So here's one. Don't know if we're going to have to run these guys out or if it's just going to make them disappear. Again, in the old days, they would just vanish when you rescued them. And yeah, so this is an old mission, right? That has never been changed because he's done. He's going to just run out by himself, I guess. When the game first started, they didn't even run out. They just disappeared, and it was just you were just to assume that they vanished, right? Sorry, that they escaped, right? They ran out, and it's just sort of fade to black kind of thing, right? Well, we're cut to the next scene. Because it was, why do you need to watch them run out, right? So we do have the fact that our defenses really do very little against energy, but our attacks do very well against these guys because I don't think they have a lot of energy defense. I think they have lethal defense, like cutting weapons don't work against them, smashing works well. I think energy works just fine. So you can see that we're like taking them out pretty quickly. Our endurance is holding up okay, so we'll leave the toggle on for now. I never did bother to get the Nemesis staff, so that is something you can get from, I think, the pay-to-win vendor. I'll try to remember to show you guys where that is if I think of it. Like maybe if we're going to level up this episode, maybe I'll go to Atlas Park and I'll show you where that is. I don't know if there are any others. I only remember one. And so the pay-to-win vendor, I can't show you where it is yet, but what the pay-to-win vendor is all of the stuff that was considered pay-to-win in the subscription game, right, where you had to like subscribe a certain amount or whatever before you could get it, or I guess you could buy it with money. I'm not really sure how it worked because by the time that was happening in City of Heroes, I wasn't playing it anymore. Oh boy. Let's Add some more resistance. We might be in trouble here. Yep, let's back up. I hate retreating as a brute or a scrapper, but yeah, I over-aggroed there. And man, they don't miss me at all. So I don't know exactly what was being paid for, or the mechanism of payment. It might have been purchasing stuff. It might have been subscription. If you're subscribed long enough, you get bonuses. I'm not exactly sure, but it was the case that there was some way to use money to get stuff. And all of that material, they can't give it to you for money on the Homecoming servers. They can't now, because I think the license is that they can't sell anything or take money. Like, they can't charge you to play the game. They can allow you to. They can take donations, Patreon or whatever. You can donate to them to operate the servers. And I don't know what they're doing now, but I believe it's the case that they open donations at a certain time of the month, and they leave them open only until they get the money they have expensed out that they're going to need this month to run the servers and pay their staff, whatever they're using the money for. And as soon as they get that amount of money, they shut down donations because they're not allowed to make a profit, right? They're sort of like a non-profit. And that's the condition. That's the way they did it at first, so that they wouldn't get sued. And now it's a condition of the license that you have to that they can't sell anything. So what they did was they unlocked all of the stuff that used to take money or subscriptions to get, right? Because they can't make you subscribe, because they can't take your money, right? And they can't charge you anything for the stuff. I don't think they can even do something like give a bonus to people who donated. I think they're not allowed to do stuff like that. And they were certainly afraid to do it when they were using the game without permission, right? When they didn't have the actual permission that they have now. And so they took all of that stuff that it used to cost money when the game was live in order to have, and they put it on a vendor, and they made it so that you could purchase it with in-game stuff like influence that doesn't cost any money to acquire, rather than with money or with tokens that you buy with money or something like that. So you basically just get it for free. And I think even the influence is very nominal. We'll check it and take a look. And I think the Nemesis staff may be on that. Although, yeah, see, on Rebirth, they used to, instead of that, Rebirth used to just mail all that stuff to you, and then you could just take it out of the mail and attach it to your character. It was actually kind of annoying because it just fill your mailbox up with all this crap, and it was all the pay-to-win stuff. Because again, Rebirth can't charge you either, and they don't actually have an official license for running City of Heroes. It's unlikely that they'll get one, but my guess is because NCSoft has not really bothered them, I don't think they probably will. It's actually a big step for NCSoft to allow this, because having done this, it's going to be a really tough sell for them to actually try and sue anybody for reusing their game at this point, right? Because they haven't. The only way to really do that, as I understand it, with things that are like copyrighted or your intellectual property, is you must aggressively defend it at all times. And a lot of people don't understand this. Doesn't necessarily mean I always think that the aggressive defense is the right move, but there are a lot of people who don't understand this, and when somebody aggressively defends a trademark against somebody who seems to be fairly harmless, people get upset. I over-aggroed again. But these guys are white cons, so hopefully it'll be okay. It always seems when I over-aggro that I go through these miss chains. It's almost like the game knows you're screwed. So let me explain that a little bit. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but this is the way I understand it. If you have a trademark and you want to keep the trademark, you have to consistently use the trademark. If you let it go for too many years, you lose it. And you have to B, aggressively defend the trademark against any infringements. If you fail to aggressively defend the trademark, or if it's text, the copyright, that is taken by the courts as evidence that you don't care anymore. And also, if you allow people to use your trademark, some people to use your trademark, you can't then go after others, right? You set the precedent, right? And so much of law is about precedent. You set the precedent that you're not going to defend it. And so they basically, any company that cares about its trademarks or its copyrights basically has no choice but to aggressively defend against all comers, no matter how trivial or silly it may seem. So, I mean, literally, you will get cases where it's almost the equivalent of a little kid putting up, Minnie Mouse for her lemonade stand, and Disney comes after her for it. And it's not because Disney doesn't want to let a little girl make Minnie Mouse lemonade. It's because if they don't aggressively defend it against her, then when DreamWorks tries to co-opt Minnie Mouse, DreamWorks can go to court and say, well, they don't aggressively defend their copyright, and so, or their trademark, and so it's no longer valid. So a great example of this kind of thing is Supergirl. Since the 80s, if not before, there have been complaints about her name because although Supergirl was 15 years old when she first appeared in comics in the 1950s, they slowly, gradually aged her up to into her 20s. And then they de-aged her in the Daring New Adventures of Supergirl to 19, but they still kept her like a legal adult, right? She's legally a woman, not a child. And there were a lot of people who complained that you shouldn't be calling her Supergirl anymore. This was even addressed in the TV show where Melissa Benoist, who was playing Supergirl, was 24 years old when the series started, right? And she even objected to being called Supergirl by Cat Grant. And Cat Grant had this silly defense of, well, I'm a girl and what's the difference? But the reason they call her Supergirl isn't because what's the difference? It's because they have to. And Paul Kruperberg, who wrote the Supergirl comic in the 1980s, answered this in the letter column. Somebody asked about it. And he said, well, the problem is if we rename her something else, like Super Lady, and the name Supergirl doesn't get used, that will cause the trademark to lapse, and then anybody can use the name Supergirl instead of DC Comics, and potentially trademark it. And this has happened, right? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Wizards of the Coast allowed the Star Frontiers trademark to lapse, and I believe the TSR company trademark to lapse, and one of Gary Gygax's kids or grandkids or nephews or somebody registered the trademark of TSR and registered the trademark of Star Frontiers, and caused all kinds of controversy because then, I don't know, he was making controversial statements. And so now it's a problem for Wizards of the Coast because they let the trademark lapse, right? And so similarly, NCSoft, if they want to retain intellectual property control of City of Heroes, they would have to threaten with a cease and desist letter and sue. And they would have had to do it in 2019. Right? I think one of the reasons they've decided to go ahead and give a license here is it would be very hard for them to successfully sue now because they have allowed not just one, but multiple groups of players to run private servers without consequence since 2019. It's been 5 years. And if they try to come along now and say we're going to sue and we want them to stop, I think a lot of courts would question it and say, well, why didn't you stop them in 2019? You could have sent out cease and desist letters in 2019 or 2020 or 2021. Why are you doing this now? Right? And having given a license to one of these unofficial servers that are basically run by fans of the game, it's hard to argue why that it's not okay for the other fans of the game to use it too. Right? Now the Rebirth people and the The other whoever else is still running these servers could say, well, they let um, they let Homecoming do it, and so we were hoping they would let us do it too, right? They said to Homecoming, even though you've been using the server code unlicensed for 5 years, we're going to license you now. So apparently they don't mind. It would be very hard now for NCSoft to try and take these guys down. And so I'm not making any ethical comments about this, just in terms of what I understand about the way the legal situation works with stuff like this. You have to defend your trademark and your copyright and your other intellectual property aggressively, or you kind of can't defend it at all. So there are a lot of people who do defend it aggressively, and folks get upset, copyright strikes on channels and stuff. But you have to understand that sometimes people would rather not. They'd rather let you go ahead and use it for non-commercial purposes, but they know that if they don't aggressively defend their copyrighted material or their trademark material, they could lose the ability to have it be their trademark, right? They could lose it. Just like DC Comics has to keep using the name Supergirl. By the way, that's why they couldn't keep her dead. They killed her off in 1985 in the Crisis on Infinite Earths and said she's permanently dead. And then a few years later, they had a Supergirl character. It was a character calling herself Supergirl who wasn't from Krypton and had basically been, it was like an artificial being created to trick Superman. And even after everything, they called her Supergirl like as a trick. But then even after everything came out and she went on Superman's side and was no longer tricking him, she still continued to call herself Supergirl, even though there was really no good reason for that, right? And there's a boss, so we'll go ahead and buff up. And why? Because they still needed somebody called Supergirl to be consistently and regularly appearing in the comics to protect their copyright, protect their trademark, right? It didn't have to be Kara Zor-El. It didn't have to be a character from Krypton, right? It didn't matter who was being called Supergirl. It only mattered that somebody was, right? Because otherwise you can lose the trademark. And we're being ambushed. But it doesn't matter because we've leveled up. So I'm going to try to go to Atlas Park and we'll see if we can find the P2W, the pay-to-win vendor. Now I would like an AoE to try and take these little gears out. I don't have to do it. We could just hit the mission complete button, but let's finish it. And off we go. So let's contact, we're going to have to go to Athena Curry, which is actually fine because she's over by the train station, and we're going to need to head to Atlas Park so that I can look for the pay-to-win vendor. But let's do it this way so I can show you a little trick. It used to be that there were two different train lines, and the train line here in the south, the monorail, was, I don't know, was it a green line and a blue line or a green line and a yellow line? I can't remember. But the one line only went to the low-level zones, this line, right? It's way down there. It's 1 mile away. And then this line went to the high-level zones. And so this was sort of the connector. And so to go to Talus Island and the other high-level zones, you had to use this train station. So if you were in Atlas Park, you would have to come to this train station and then fly or super jump or teleport all the way across town to here, and then get on this monorail to go to the other section. And there were actually these guys. I think the guild was called something like Checker Cab, and they were like wore armor suits that were yellow with red and white checkered symbols, and they had teleport friend. And what you would do is you would ask them. I know you join their group temporarily. They would click on you in the group menu, teleport you to them, and then you would leave the group. And so they could teleport you in one shot from one place to the other. And I think it was just some players who were just being nice. I don't think they charged you anything. But nowadays the lines are connected, so I can actually go straight to Steel Canyon South from Steel Canyon North. That wasn't true in the past. We've hit level 11. I'm not purposely playing this in Iron Man mode, but so far we are following it to the best of my ability. We don't have trainer enhancements because that doesn't exist. So we have DOs. Um, shall we add some energy? Yeah, let's add some damage. Okay, and let's add this one for the endurance. This will buff it up to what, 11? Yeah, so they don't. So apparently there's no limit to how many times you can combine enhancements now, whereas in the past there was a limit. You could only do it twice, right? So this would start out as 10. It would go to 10 plus, and then this would be 10 plus plus. Let's see, what else we got? Defense. I'll take it. I mean, let's go ahead and use the ones that we can. We don't need taunt, and we can't use that one. So we'll go ahead and clear these. By the way, another difference from launch. Originally, you just had one tray. You didn't have these other 6 or 7 trays. You just had one. Imagine that, guys. You would fill up, and people would like stop in the middle of missions and say, "I'm all full, right? I've got to go sell." And if it was a big mission, we would all stop and sell, and then come back to the mission, because you needed every last bit of influence you possibly could back in those days. Let's do Haley. I don't really remember who gives what missions. So this is a story arc, the Clockwork Captive, so we'll go ahead and take that mission. But before we use it, let's go to Atlas Park. We'll level up with Ms. Liberty, that hussy, who's stolen my motif of magic and part of my name. And we'll then see if I can find the pay-to-win vendor. If I can, we'll look at it. If I can't, and we won't worry about it. So let's go to Miss Liberty. And somewhere around here, I don't see it. There used to be a blimp that flew around Atlas Park, and it used to drive me nuts, because I tried to super jump to it. I wanted to take a ride on the blimp, and I just kept falling off of it, and then finally I flew up to it when a different character had flying. And yeah, it turns out you can't land on it. It just slides you off. It has no collision box or whatever. You can't stand on it and ride it. Okay, so let's train up to a new level of power. Let's see, Indomitable Will. What has that got? This does have the Psionic Defense, so we're going to need triple slotting that. Mind over Body has just defense. We're going to need one more to get endurance reducer on that. And then let's go ahead and get another one there. We're good to go. And now let us sell, and then we'll see if we can find the pay-to-win vendor. Should be right over here, but let's sell first. We'll get rid of all this stuff. One thing you can do if you're not planning on making any recipes, you can just ditch the salvage, although stuff like this is often worth selling because usually the orange is worth a lot of cash, a lot of influence. But I tend to just keep salvage unless I start running out. So this is the pay-to-win field agent. So pay-to-win vendor offers a range of metahuman stuff. Show me your wares. So let's see. Prestige enhancements. This is free. Prestige powers. So this is where you get like... already own this. We already own some of these. The undead. So here it is: the Sands of Mew, the undead slaying axe, the Nemesis staff. Right. So let me grab one just so you can see it. I'll claim the Nemesis staff. And oh no, not that. That's not what I want. I want that. And that we'll put right here. And I'll just show it to you so you can see it. So you can claim any of those. And as you can see, it's basically free. And the reason it's free is because they can't charge money for playing on the server. So one of the things I actually want to talk about, I was at RB, somebody mentioned this, and I was like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about it because my character doesn't die very often. Oh look, we're in the right town as well. Oh, and something else I do want to mention, gosh, I'm being so disorganized here. But yeah, there's this zone called the Hollows, and it's like level 6 to 10 or 11. So we've out leveled it, but it's sort of like a pseudo hazard zone, but also a city zone. There's a bunch of it's like a zone that's partially hazard and partially livable. You'll see what hazard zones are like eventually. People don't live in that, mostly live in the hazard zones like Boomtown. So these are areas that were destroyed in the Richti War. We'll talk about that as we get into the Richti in later levels. But you can go into the Hollows, and there are other missions there that you won't have seen with the ones I'm covering, because these are the ones that were done at launch. I always forget about the Hollows. I'll probably do that on my next character, who's probably going to be a Sentinel, because I want to see how those play. I got a Sentinel to like level 20 way back a couple years ago, but I definitely want to try that again and see how those play. So we'll definitely do one of those, and I might do a Keldian and just see how it goes. They're really hard to play solo, but I feel like some of the changes that have been made on Homecoming might make it possible. I don't think I feel like whatever they were doing, whatever they did with them on Rebirth, I started thinking I don't think that'll work. So here's the Nemesis staff. Does quite a bit of damage, and it does some nice KB, which is good because it's sort of a little bit of a mez. So one of the things that RB mentioned, and I completely forgot about, was that it used to be the case that when you, I don't know what they do now. If you look up here, the XP says debt 0, right? It used to be the case that when your character face planted in a mission, you went to the hospital. I said this before. You fail a mission, you just go to the hospital and come right back. It's no big deal. But actually, there was a bit of a big deal if you not failed a mission but face planted. If you face planted, you would go to the hospital, have to come back to the mission, but you also got experience debt. And I want to explain how that works, but I want to actually explain the origin of where experience debt came from. Because I wonder if, I don't know if people who are new, relatively new to MMOs, like since the last 10, 12 years, even are familiar with how this all worked. So it used to be in massively multiplayer online games that they expected the death was bad, right? It was a very, very bad thing. It was a failure of you to have your character die. And there should be, like realistically, if your character dies, you're done, right? And you have to make up a new character. And this is how tabletop role-playing games always had been, right? And most of these MMOs were designed to be mimicking tabletop role-playing games. They were derived from games like the Ultima series, which were meant to mimic tabletop games as well. But in computer games, you have the problem, and I've discussed this before, that unlike a tabletop game where the game master can slowly describe the circumstances, and you can take a minute or 2 or 5 or 10, depending on the rules at the table, to decide what to do. And as a consequence, there is not a hair trigger sudden death usually in tabletop role-playing games. Not that save versus die might not kill your character quickly, but you had a long time to think about whether you were going to open that chest without checking for traps. You know what I mean? Whereas in an RPG like this, you can see how fast if I make one little mistake, right? I made one little mistake in the sewers, and it almost face planted me, right? And it was just I had like maybe 10 seconds, if that, to realize I'd made a mistake and I better run. I don't even know if I had that many seconds. Right? Your hit point bar can drop that fast. And so in a video game, you can actually be playing fairly carefully and intelligently and not make any major mistakes, and you could still die, right? Oh, are we going to be unable to hit these guys? Oh, okay, we can. Sometimes they get stuck in the geometry and then it won't let you hit them, but this time we were able to. And that finishes the mission already. There aren't any other guys to fight. Let's check. Liberty Lass is going to be thorough, right? She's a hero. Yeah, there's nobody else. Okay. So they, the people who created these games wanted it to feel like your character died, but they recognized that having your character die forever when you could just sneeze, and while you were sneezing, your hit points dropped to 0, is pretty harsh. And most players would not play a game. Some will, but most won't play a game where if the character dies, you're going from level 1 to 50, and the character dies at level 17, you got to delete it, make up a new character, and start level 1 again. That's what I've been calling Iron Man mode, right? Um, so I'm not aware of any popular mainstream MMOs that had permanent death, right? Permadeath. However, because the MMOs wanted you to be punished for dying, they wanted you to avoid death, right? They didn't want players to just leap into the fray. Hang on, let's call her. They didn't want you to just leap into the fray and not worry about it and not care about it and just act like it was no big deal to die and just faceplant over and over again and not care. They wanted you to work hard to avoid death the way you would the way a real knight or soldier or superhero would do, right? You wouldn't just not care if you. Nobody in real life doesn't care if they die. People care and try not to die. And so they wanted players to try not have their character try not to die, right? That makes sense. And so they made some very that's a little rich for my blood there. They made some very dangerous. Oh, we're being ambushed. Very dangerous results to death, right? They made it so that. Oh, come on, stop flying. Come down here. They made it so that dying was very bad, right? And so the original death penalties, it was Ultima Online or one of them. Your character died in a dungeon, and you became basically a ghost that haunted the dungeon until another player came along and resurrected you. And I'm sure this could take many hours or possibly days. I don't really know. Anybody who ever played Ultima Online, go ahead and leave comments and explain to us how it worked. That's just what I've heard. I don't know exactly how it worked. I know in a lot of games, and I played games that had this, and I hated it. They had a corpse run. Your character dies here on the rooftop. Okay. In any game other than City of Heroes, you have gear, right? Armor and weapons and food and other kinds of loot and money. You would die. You would resurrect at the gravestone or wherever in some other part of the city, and your body with all of your gear is lying dead here, and you're naked over here, right? And then you'd have to run. Can't fly because your flight gear is on this guy, right? You'd have to run through a hostile area with no powers, no abilities, no gear, no equipment, naked, and try to get to your corpse so that you could get your stuff back. And oftentimes, like if you died with all of your gear on in the area, that meant the area was dangerous enough to kill you with all your buffs. And if you're running naked, you don't have any of those buffs. So it's that much harder, right? So I've already been unable to do it on the easy mode where I have all my equipment. How am I going to do it on hard mode? And there were people who would just die over and over and over again trying to get their body back, trying to get their gear back, which was very frustrating. And then in some games, and it depends on the game, right, the other players could loot your corpse. So if you died and somebody else found your corpse before you got through the corpse run, you might not have any gear there anyway. Players detested this. They really hated it. It was so punishing that eventually the developers of these games realized we're going to have to do something else. So the next thing that was developed right before City of Heroes came out was the concept of losing experience points, right? So you die, and when you resurrect, you've got all of your gear on you, but your experience points get dropped. Now, I don't think for any of these games you could lose enough experience points to go down to the previous level, right? But you can see here that we've earned for this level. Come on, 1,790 out of the about 5,000 that we need, right? So we could lose up to 1,790, but we would never go below, what is it? About 16,000, because that's how many XP we had when we hit level 11. So you couldn't go below your current level, but you could go down. And so what would happen is people would get stuck at level, say, 17, because they would get halfway to level 18 and then die and lose their experience back to level 17. And you might be level 17 for months because you kept losing XP. And this forced people to repeat content because they couldn't get out of the level 10 to 20 zone and stuff like that. And so this was extremely frustrating for people. Oh, we're going to fault line. This was extremely frustrating to people because you earned XP and then you would lose it. So what City of Heroes came up with was, instead of doing the loss of XP, they slowed your gain of XP. So what would happen is after you died, you'd get a little bit of orange XP tacked on, like maybe half a bar. And that was experience debt. And when you had debt, I think originally in beta, all the XP you earned went to the debt. And people didn't like that either. You got 500 XP debt. The next 500 XP you earn, you get no experience points. We're going to go grab the one badge that I know is right here in the donut hole. There it is, right there. I always like to fly through it. So this is fault line. This used to be a hazard zone. It's now sort of a combined pseudo hazard zone. So we got to be careful here because this is a high level zone for us. This is, level 11 you can do, but you're gonna if I target around, you're probably gonna see a bunch of purples. Yep, see. So you got to be careful. Nice thing about flight is you can just fly way above everybody. I think there might be a badge up here too. I know there's on one of these buildings. I can't remember which one. So let's just skim over the top and see. Maybe not. The other thing I remember on Homecoming is there was a badge in front of this building that I got to work on Rebirth, but I didn't get to work on Homecoming. But I don't know if there are villains around here that I might want to avoid. Can't remember exactly where it was. I think it was at the doorway. But I guess not. I could have sworn there was one right near here. But I feel like when I tried to have Silver Phoenix get it, it wouldn't trip. And I was never able to complete the fault line badges because that one wouldn't trip. And then when I got onto Rebirth, I said, let me try it and see if it actually works here, and it did. So I don't know what happened, but it seems like it's not working still. Anyway, back to the debt. So eventually what they did was they said, okay, what will happen is we'll have half your XP go to paying off your debt and half your XP go to gaining XP. So if you had 500 experience of debt, then, and you got 100 XP that you earned, 50 would become a gain of XP and 50 would pay off the debt, and you would just keep doing that until you'd earned 1,000 total XP, 500 pays off the debt, and 500 gains you XP. So it basically just, essentially it cut your XP gain in half until you cleared the debt. Right? And there was, originally there was quite, I believe you got about a bar of debt, maybe, every time you died. So if you died like 10 times in a mission, you'd have a whole, you could have, I think, at most one level worth of debt. And there were friends that I had who basically had a level worth of debt. And the blasters, oh my gosh. I didn't realize this as a scrapper, because I never had this happen to me. But there were blasters on my team that they called it permadebt, right? They were in so much debt all the time, and they could never clear it before they died again. And they were just in debt all the time. And I remember when I complained about not having enough influence for my character, the others were like, "Oh, well, we have enough influence." And as we talked about what happened, we realized that they had more influence than I did because they were only gaining half the XP because they were all in debt. So I'll show you when we finish fighting these guys. You can see the rewards here, right? We're getting 43 XP and 20 influence. That's not the way it used to be. It used to be 1-for-1. I think we're on kind of like double XP right now to celebrate the license. So you're gaining more XP than you would normally. But it used to be, originally, it was 1-for-1. So if you're in debt, what you would see is if it was 20 experience and 20 influence with no debt. If you had debt, it would be you got 10 experience, 20 influence, and cleared 10 debt, right? And so I was earning about 1 influence per XP I gained, and they were earning essentially 2 influence per XP they gained. So they had like twice as much influence as I did, right? When you were originally, if you had 18,000 XP earned, you would have 18,000 influence earned from XP influence, and then more because you'd sold some enhancements, but not this much, right? Because they weren't giving DOs back then, and the trainers aren't worth that much. But so I would, when I was at 50,000 XP, I only had maybe earned 150,000 influence. These guys had earned 250,000 or something like that because they got so much more influence. And I remember the one guy saying to me that he was purposely killing himself. He was finding buildings with red cons or purple cons at the base of the skyscraper, going to the top of the skyscraper. He had super jump, turning off super jump and throwing himself off the building to land. And I don't think it kills you no matter how high you are, but it would drop him to like this much health, and then he would just let the bad guys kill him. And he would do that until he filled up a whole entire experience level of debt on purpose to slow down his leveling so that he would have more influence by the time he leveled. Right? And I remember writing on the forum and saying to Statesman and the other devs, guys, there's something wrong with the way you've coded your game and your sort of the way you have the balance of influence versus XP and leveling set. When you have players purposely committing suicide to try and increase how much influence they have available, right? Players shouldn't be doing that. But I think that was another scrapper. The blasters, the defenders and controllers, those guys were constantly in debt. And I remember, like, when I was in my 30s, right, with my martial arts character, like, after she was, like, 30th level, I don't think she almost ever died solo. It's like this, right? I knew what I was doing, and scrappers, can defend themselves and all that. And so, this isn't to say that the blasters didn't know what they were doing. It's just blasters are a lot harder to survive in the high levels. And the biggest problem back then, they didn't have break-free inspirations, and so if the blasters were hit with a mez, they were just killed. And what I didn't realize, because I had practice brawler and I'd made it permanent, so it was complete proof against any and all mezzes. Nothing could get through practice brawler in the way it was at launch. Once you had permitted, and so that you had it like it was a sort of click power that lasted like 2 minutes and 10 seconds, but you could get the recharge on it to recharge within like a minute and 55 seconds. So it would stack, and it was really good defense. You could see how it works with Silver Phoenix, but yeah, once I had that in, my character never got mezzed, and so I didn't actually realize how many of the higher level enemies have a mez component in their attacks, because from like 10th level on, I had practice brawler, and from 22nd level on, it had been permanent, right? And so, and all of that extra mez starts coming in the 20s, right? So the Devouring Earth, several of them have sleep and hold and stuff like that. The Rikti, their guns and their swords have a mez component. It's a weak mez, but it can mesmerize you if you don't have any defense. And I didn't realize it because I had fought the Rikti in my 30s, right? That's when you start fighting Rikti. And yeah, my character was immune to Mez at that point. And so I've told this story before, but I actually had a friend of mine got really mad at me on the supergroup channel where I said something like, where is this? Hang on. Why is that? I feel like I heard a glowy up here. Maybe not. I was trying to level up. I think it was 34, or maybe I was 39. I don't know. I was in the 30s. I feel like it was 34, and I had run out of missions. Right, my contacts were out of missions, and this could happen in the old days because it took so many XP to level, and they didn't have as many story arcs as they have now. So I ran out of missions, and I had to spend like a whole level just grinding. I'm like, okay, where am I going to grind? Where am I going to try to like level up? And I went into like Craze Folly or something, and I was finding, or maybe the Rikti War Zone, I can't remember, but I had found a spot where there were all these like hazard zone spawns of Rikti. All right, so it'll be 12, 15 Rikti, mostly like Guardians, conscripts, maybe some communications officers, drones. And I was just going in and soloing these hazard zone spawns of Rikti and just beating on them and just kicking their butts. And they couldn't do anything to me. And so I remember saying on the channel, man, I love fighting Rikti. They're so much fun to beat on. And they're pretty weak or something like that. And the people on my channel, with my other super mates, got on the channel and they were like, the one guy was like, well, what do you mean they're weak? What about all their mez? And I said, what mez? Rikti have mez? I had no idea because I'd never been mezed by a Rikti. And they're like, yeah, all their guns and weapons and everything have a mez component. What do you mean? Like, haven't you ever fought them before? Like, yeah, I'm fighting them right now. They don't mez. Like, I've never been mezed by a Rikti. And yeah, they like cursed me out. They were like, they were like, how could you never have been mezed? I'm like, yeah, I'm a scrapper. I don't get mezed. But the blasters, yeah, those guys hated Rikti. Why? Because they get mezed. One blast from the blaster would cause them to get dizzy and stagger around, and then all the other Rikti would just pound on them and they would die. And so all the blasters in my supergroup and the controllers and all those guys were vulnerable to the mez. Most of the defenders had a way to buff you and protect you against mez, but I mostly couldn't protect themselves. I think there were maybe one defense set that had an AOE, like click defense, where it would everybody in the radius, including yourself, would be protected. But for the most part, the defenders had to protect other people, but they couldn't protect themselves, right? Because Statesman didn't want tank mages, and if you have a defender defending himself and throwing out energy blasts, now you have a tank mage, right? And so, I mean, at least in Statesman's eyes. So, over time, they've relaxed this, and they made the defenders able to, more different of the power sets can defend themselves. But at the time, you couldn't. And so all of these guys were vulnerable to the mezzes. So in the upper levels, they were just face planting all over the place. And as a scrapper, I wasn't. So I didn't really face a lot of debt. But they did. And there actually is a badge. I don't remember if it's an accomplishment, an achievement. Right? Like collect 25 badges and accolade. Somewhere in here, and I don't know if they have them here anymore in Homecoming, because I don't know if they do debt anymore. I haven't died here lately, so I think they do a little bit of debt. But they, but there is a badge for clearing 1 million debt. And I'm not sure I've ever won it. Because my characters just didn't die enough to go into that much debt. But I bet you a bunch of my friends did, the blasters. So let's go back to Steel Canyon. We'll talk to Athena Curry, and then I think we'll wrap up here, guys. I hope you've enjoyed our little stroll down memory lane and discussion of things like pay to win and trademark, and of course experience debt. Again, I I'm not really doing an organized tutorial here. I do know that several people have made the comments that they're new to City of Heroes and they're getting a bit of pointers from this. Um, if you have questions, if you don't know how to do something, or you want me to show you something, go ahead and leave it in the comments, and I'll try to do that. Just keep in mind that certain things are level dependent. So if I may have out-leveled some things already, we won't be able to do them on this character. If it's a higher level thing, I won't be able to show you until we get to the higher levels, but I'll make a list. And so feel free in the comments to just leave a comment. Hey, could you please cover this, or talk about this, or show this, or explain this, or demonstrate this, and I'll try to do it. You don't have to wait a long time because I'm actually posting these like the day after I record them. So unlike, say, when I was doing Silver Phoenix and I already had like 20 episodes in the can before I had posted because I wasn't sure if I was going to post them or whether they were going to be good enough to post or whatever. I'm posting these as I go. There's no backlog. At least not right now. Sometimes what happens is I play a bunch. I play too much, 3, 4, 5 times in a day. I'm not going to post more than one video a day because it's just too much. It takes a long time to upload, and for whatever reason, YouTube's been taking like an hour to process these videos. It used to do it in like 10 minutes. And a couple of times with American Truck Simulator, I uploaded and it like failed the process and told me you got to re-upload. So I try not to do more than one of those a day. Plus, I can't imagine people want to watch it more than once a day. So, but I'm pretty much caught up, right? I'm making this the day I posted the episode before this when we hit level 10, and I will post this tomorrow. So, um, yeah, it should be pretty much immediate, right? If you ask me in a video, in video 5 to do something, by video 7 or 8, I should be able to do it within a day or two. So just go ahead and let me know if you want me to make videos about particular things having to do with how to do stuff in City of Heroes. Go ahead and make that comment, and I'll try to do it. Um, just don't ask me to do Incarnate Trials, because that I won't do. Until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes on the Homecoming servers.